What is going on, Predators? Today we're going to be talking again about the carnivore diet, and today we're going to be talking about 5 different myths that you'll hear in the wild or on the internet about the carnivore diet and how to combat these myths as misinformation. You'll notice today I got a little bit of a sinus thing. It's been hanging around for about 3 weeks. I've been traveling all over the place. I was in South Dakota for a week where it was 3 degrees and windy, came back to Houston where it was 70 degrees. Then I went out to Missouri for a week where it was 12 degrees, and so I've kind of been back to Houston again. So again, I've been traveling all over and it's been taking a toll on my sinuses a little bit. But without further ado, guys, let's go ahead and do further, and we will jump into myth number 1. Myth number 1 about the carnivore diet that you'll hear quite often is that eating all that meat, it's just going to rot in your gut. So a lot of people say this because they don't really understand how meat and eggs and fish and pork and other meat products are digested inside your body. So with a lot of the meat products that are out there, they have between an 80 and 90 to 95% bioavailability. And in the case of eggs, it's about 95 to 99%. And in the case of whey protein, it's about 100% bioabsorbable and bioavailable. So for a lot of us that have been on the carnivore diet, and you see a huge reduction in the amount of bloating and the amount of gas that you have, it's because there's less byproducts produced by the foods that you eat in your gut. So with a lot of plant-based diets and a lot of high fiber diets, whenever that pushes through that stuff in your gut, it actually reacts and it creates gas in there. So like I say, I was never as gassy in my life as I have been whenever I had been on a high fiber diet. But with a carnivore diet, what happens is that meat and that protein and everything is broken down and it's used by your body, and it's a lot more bioavailable and bioabsorbable, meaning that there's a lot more amino acids in that meat. Bioavailability means that your body can use that protein and use it to restore muscles and things like that. So by the time your digestion and that absorption is all done, there's very little material actually left in your gut. That's why a lot of people on the carnivore diet experience the point where they can go 2 to 3 days sometimes without actually having a bowel movement, because there's just not much in there to be moving around. This is one reason I had a very significant decrease in the amount of bloating in my gut and the amount of gas that was there, because there's just not much in there. It's a lot easier to digest a small amount of meat than it is a huge amount of vegetables. Typically animals that are vegetarians, like cows and goats and things like that, they have ruminant stomachs. They have many chambered or really multiple stomachs there so they can digest that, because it takes a long time to digest that plant material. And this is why cows are known for farting quite a bit, is because that process of breaking down the plant matter, it rots inside there, and it actually produces a lot of gases that cause you to fart. Myth number 2, and that myth number 2 is that it's pointless to eat that much protein because your body can't use it all anyways, and whatever it doesn't use, it's just gonna pass down the poop chute. And while there is a very little science to back this, about certain types of protein, usually like proteins that are introduced from certain kinds of like powders and shakes and things like that. With meat, on the other hand, you have the correct amount of amino acids in that food source to be able to fully utilize that protein, bond it to your muscles, and actually also use it for another process that a lot of people don't really talk about, and that's called gluconeogenesis. Long story short, that gluconeogenesis is basically the process of turning the protein that it's not used to, rebuild your muscles and all that stuff into basically glucose that your body needs or your brain needs to function. So even on a diet like the carnivore diet, where it's usually very, very low carb, almost zero carb in some instances, so your body still needs that glucose in order to power your brain and in order to be able to give your muscles what they need to work and operate efficiently throughout the day. So there's this process called gluconeogenesis, where your body will take that protein and break it down and create glucose from it. And that is a way that you can still have the proper amount of glucose for your brain and your muscles without adding glucose into your diet. So in my first carnivore video that I did right about a year ago, that was one thing that I was struggling with, was adding more sugar into my diet so that I could supplement my needs in the gym, because I felt like whenever I had sugar in my diet, simple sugars, something easy to break down, that I was able to, go harder in the gym and go longer in the gym, last longer, and have a better workout. And although that was true, the problem is if you have that glucose in your diet and you're not using it almost immediately after digestion, then what you'll see that basically your body turns that into fat and it stores it as fat in your body if it's not used right away. Well, the great thing is I've kind of found through research is that if I have enough fat and enough protein on board, I have enough energy from that fat, and then I have enough protein in my system that my body's going to turn that excess protein into glucose. If my body needs it, it's going to turn it into glucose so that my muscles have enough energy and everything to go through that workout in the gym and have a great workout. So myth number 3 we're going to talk about is that being on a carnivore diet or a high protein diet based off of animal meats is bad for you and it's going to cause heart disease. And this is actually, there is something to this, and I like to give credit where credit's due. But it's really more based in a diet that is high in meats, rich in fat, as well as a high carb intake. And so basically what happens is that whenever your body has 2 different energy sources that it can choose from, it chooses the different energy sources based on their priority. So with carbohydrates, they're a very simple form of energy that can be broken down very easily and very quickly. And they are broken down very quickly by your body. The downside to carbohydrates, though, is if you don't use them quickly, what's going to happen is that your body's going to turn that into fat. Well, then on comes this fat that you've gotten from, say, a high quality steak with a good amount of fat on it. It takes a lot more time for your body to process fats than it does carbohydrates for energy. So basically what can happen is if you have a lot of both carbohydrates and fat in your system, your body's going to be storing a lot more fat in your tissues, okay? Well, what can happen with that is that it can store that fat in your tissues around your heart, can cause things like congestive heart failure, because you can have that sac that around your heart, that can actually clog up with fat and can make your heart have to work harder, which can cause issues with failure of the muscle and things like that. Although that visceral fat is something that you have to survive. If that fat level gets too low, then you can actually have more heart issues in different areas. So if you get too lean, I guess you'd say. But whenever you have those 2 things on there, you also end up storing more plaque in your body, and it kind of clogs up your vessels, which can cause a heart attack. So by switching to a carnivore, a high-fat diet like the carnivore diet, or even a modified keto diet, what can happen is that your body, instead of trying to process those 2 different fats or those 2 different energy sources at the same time, it can go when you take the carbohydrates out of there, it uses those fats as your primary energy source. And I've actually seen people do this as well. To be honest, with a carbohydrate diet, if they take all the fats out of their diet and they go on a really low fat, high carbohydrate diet, then it's actually going to have the same thing where they're going to have more energy and they're going to store less fat. If they're an active person. If you are not an active person and you're not out there very much, I really don't recommend a high carb, low fat diet, because that can lead you in a lot of issues where you're still storing fat because you're not burning it and you have an excess of carbohydrates in your body, which your body will store as fat in the tissues. So when it comes to the carnivore diet, again, having that higher fat content and that low carbohydrate content in your diet is going to give your body plenty of energy from fat, which takes your liver a little bit longer time to process. So it's going to be a long, slow burning energy source, and you're going to store less fat in your body, in your tissues, because of that. All right, the next method we're going to talk about is that whenever you go on a carnivore diet and you're eating a lot of meat, that meat basically just has protein and fat. It doesn't have the vitamins and the minerals that your body needs to commit its daily functions. And so this is really interesting because there's a kernel of truth in it. A lot of these things with a lot of these myths, there are a kernel of truth in it, but in the long run, if you really understand the diet and you really understand what you're supposed to be eating here, then it really doesn't hold water. And to some people that are new on the diet, they can actually fall into this trap and become people that are, anti-carnivore diet because they think that, hey, this is actually kind of true. So let me talk about what I mean by that. So in the carnivore diet, like I say, if you were just eating, let's say, sirloin steaks all the time, and I had a grass-fed sirloin steak for lunch, for breakfast, for every day for a couple months, then there is a possibility of falling into a deficiency in certain vitamins in your diet. But then, like I say, there's another way to look at this, is that if you eat a, let's say, beef liver, or you cook liver and something like that, then I am going to get 1,300% of my daily value of vitamin A, and like many 100% of my daily value of vitamin C. So organ meats are actually the most nutrient dense parts of the animal. And so if you're not eating an organ meat, or not at least trying it in some form or whatever, I would recommend doing that. Try some recipes, and if you want to have me, if you want me to do some recipes on like some beef liver and something like that, chicken liver, chicken gizzards, whatever it is, then go ahead and comment below. Let me know about that. I'm fixing to do a video about making beef jerky because you have highly requested it. That's something that's going to come up in the next video. So let's talk about, again, eating organ meats. So organ meats are so nutritionally dense, and I think that every carnivore should be trying to eat them. I understand that some people are like, ooh, organs, it's like, well, you're still eating an organ. By eating the muscle, you're eating a large piece of that tissue of the animal. So it's not a huge jump to go eat a heart or go eat a liver. And again, you don't have to eat a whole lot of it because they're so dense in nutrients that you get so much of that you don't need to eat a whole lot of it. And the good thing is you can mix those things in with other things. So if you were to do like a ground beef and liver together or something like that, that would actually kind of mask the flavor of the liver a little bit. And then you can actually, it makes it a little bit easier to eat. Do chicken and cut up chicken gizzards together, kind of do it in like a stir fry kind of configuration. Then that's, again, it's going to be another way to kind of add those vitamins, add those nutrients into your daily intake with the carnivore diet, and not be vitamin deficient, not be deficient on anything. And so let's jump over a little quick and take a look at what plants offer. So if you look at like, broccoli, for instance, I'll put up some stats up here and show, comparison between broccoli and a comparison between like liver or like, heart or something like that. But basically, I don't have all these stats just built into my head here, obviously. But one thing to note is that, like I say, ounce per ounce, there's just way more of those vitamins and everything in the organ meat of the animals there. So, which I can't stand eating just a little bit of broccoli. So again, I think it's really a thing to do your research and understand where your nutrition's coming from, what it's got in it and everything, because there is an easy way to stay on the carnivore diet and get way more vitamins and way more nutrients from your daily food intake than you could on a vegetarian or a vegan diet without supplementation of taking external supplements and external vitamins and things like that. This right here is going to be another call to you guys. Like I say, if you can't tell, I got my bow back here. I am a hunter, a bow hunter, and so I like to go out and source my meat naturally and wild if I can. And I've got a freezer full. I keep looking over here because I've got a freezer full of meat over here. My neighbor is just a cool guy and actually just gave me several pounds of beef and axis deer meat that I need to go make. And I'm probably going to make some exotic burgers pretty soon. So if you want to, again, click subscribe, like this video. I want to show some those cooking exotic meats video here coming pretty soon. But guys, you need to branch out because, like I say, branching out and using different types of meats, whether you're eating, ruminant animal meats, if you're eating fish, you're eating all these, there's so many different types of meats out there. Don't forget about that. It's not just about beef and it's not just about red meat. There's lamb, there's goat, there's all these things. And I think once you branch out a little bit, you'll find that you can really like these things, and you can really branch out your needs and get more out of the carnivore diet than just simply eating red meat all the time. It's not just quite a steak and butter diet, although you can get really far with that. There's a couple other small myths out there that, things like having that much protein in your diet is going to kill your kidneys. Again, I can't find where the research on this comes. I've done a research on this, and the protein doesn't really affect your kidneys as much. Really, the main thing that affects your kidneys, and coming from a person, I used to work, and I still work in the medical field, and I worked previously at dialysis clinics or for a company managing people's fistula accesses and things like that for dialysis patients. And one thing that we find that really is most hard on the kidneys more than anything, before even thinking about protein in your diet or anything like that, is really water intake, and people not having enough water in their diet. So drinking enough water, staying hydrated, making sure you have enough electrolytes in your diet. If I dilute that uric acid that is produced by my kidneys, then it's really not going to be harmful to my kidneys. Now, if I'm not drinking enough water, I'm not drinking enough fluids, don't have enough electrolytes in my system, then I'm going to get a lot lot of issues. And without enough electrolytes, I'm going to have a problem, because like I say, electrolytes are one of the main neurotransmitters, neurocommunicators in our brain. And so if you don't have enough of those, you're gonna have a lot of issues with muscle spasms and things like that. But not only that, if I don't have enough water in my diet, like I say, then my kidneys can't flush all that uric acid out. The only way I could see this was being an issue is, let me just kind of break it down for you. So whenever you have, you're digesting protein and it ends up in your bloodstream, the only way that it's not going to be used by your body and it's going to stay in your bloodstream, I can imagine, is that if you don't have enough amino acids built in that. Almost all animal-based products have way more than enough amino acids and a complete amino acid profile that will allow it to help your body use all that protein. Interestingly enough, the only diet that really has a lack of those amino acids that will keep more of that protein flowing through your bloodstream is a plant-based protein diet, like pea proteins and things like that, soy proteins. They don't have all the amino acids, and therefore you're gonna have more of that flowing through your bloodstream. And again, it's going to, if there was a potential for it to be hard on your kidneys, it would be that type of diet. So I'm not a scientist, and I know a lot of us in the comments are not scientists. So if you want more information about that, there's some great videos that go deep dive into these subjects from Dr. Sean Baker and Dr. Ken Berry, some of the two most prominent leading doctors on this subject. So go ahead and check those videos out and they can give you a more in-depth profile. If you want me to compile all the data that they've talked about, again, comment that down below so I know, hey, what you guys videos want, so I know what you guys want to see in a video. The last thing I'm going to talk about here today, and this is myth number 5, is that the carnivore diet is expensive. It doesn't have to be expensive. It can get expensive, but it doesn't have to be. So I made a kind of analogy in my previous video. What I was trying to say is that I made the example of, that I can buy a $25, bone-in tomahawk ribeye from Walmart and I can eat off of that for an entire day. And people are saying, well, that's too expensive. Most people, like if I had a family of 4, that's like $100 to feed everybody for a day. And what my point by that was saying that by getting a tomahawk ribeye, if you don't know, that's kind of like a carnivore's wet dream as far as meat goes. A lot of us, like I say, a nice, big, thick, fatty cut of a bone-in ribeye is just, that's like the Cadillac of dinners. So I can feed a whole family on the Cadillac of dinners on doing just protein for an entire day, not just dinner, on maybe $100 or something like that, eating really, really, really fine food. Versus if I were to feed my whole family for an entire day on fast food, even with the prices especially at the way the prices are right now, it would cost about the same amount. And instead, we can all have tomahawk ribeyes for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right? Obviously, you wouldn't want to eat the same thing all day long. Most people don't. I could do it, but not everybody can. So again, like I said, what I was trying to make a point is there's cheap and there's very expensive options with the carnivore diet. But the most expensive option with the carnivore diet, eating something like tomahawk steaks all day, is still cheaper than going out and buying food at a fast food restaurant. For instance, the other day I went to Chick-fil-A. I was driving on the road and I went and I got some of their grilled nuggets, which are basically just little chunks of chicken breast that are grilled and served up in a little cup. That was what I ate for lunch. I usually can eat 2 12 counts of these nuggets there and still have a little bit of room for more, but I eat 2 12 counts of these nuggets whenever I get a large water to go with it. I am looking, especially if I don't have anybody else in the family, I'm almost $20 in just for that one meal. It's pretty expensive, and I'm just eating chunks of chicken breast. There's probably cheaper places I could go, but I do trust the quality of the Chick-fil-A's food in most places. So like what I'm saying is that there's cheap ways and there's expensive ways to eat on the carnivore diet. The really cheap way is to go get some hamburger meat. Honestly, in most places you can get hamburger meat for like $2.50 a pound, some places $2 a pound, or like my local butcher shop here has a deal where I can get 60 pounds of meat for like $29 or something like that, where it's just whole parts of cow. I've got ribs, I've got steaks, I've got chops, I've got everything in this big 60-pound bag. And so there's lots of ways you can eat very frugal in this diet and make it last quite a long time. I've got a freezer full of food over there I was talking about, again, because I'm a hunter, right? So I'm able to do this. Hunting isn't cheap, But I really, if you want to do it, if you want to be, you know, responsible for the taking of these animals and responsible for harvesting your food and bringing that home to your family, I highly recommend it. I have a bow hunting basic series that you can click. I'll try to put a card up here about that, so you can follow that and get started in bow hunting and understand what it takes. But anyways, guys, the diet, you can go expensive, you can go cheap. You can hit the mid-ground. The great thing is there's a lot of flexibility with the carnivore diet. Although the prices of butter and the prices of eggs are through the roof. When I made my last video, the prices of eggs were cheap, and I've just been gifted about 6 dozen eggs, 7 dozen eggs from my dad, who has, you know, chickens, a whole, like, I think 16 different chickens. So I posted that video saying that eggs are about $2.50 for an 18 count, and they have definitely gone up since then. But they're going to come back down eventually. So eggs, pork chops have always been really cheap. Pigs are easy to grow. I love wild pig also, by the way. If you haven't had that, come here to Texas. Let's do some hog hunting and get your own wild boar, guys. It's really fun. It's a blast, and you're almost guaranteed success on that hunt. Great way to start out. So anyways, lots of different things, guys. Let's start the conversation down in the comments below. Let's talk about, you know, all the different ways. If you have great cheap options for the carnivore diet, I want to hear about them. So thanks for watching, Predators, and as always, keep defying the odds. Peace out.